everyone. For this week's class, we're talking about engaging and connecting with the person living with dementia. Before we get started, I just wanted to share some really neat dementia research in the news that was shared with me by one of your peers. So this piece of research comes from the Journal of Prevention of Alzheimer's Disease, and the study found that when we listen to music, our brain actually experiences a type of response. This type of response is called autonomous sensory meridian response. And for a person, what it feels like is like a tingling sensation in our brain or in our scalp. And the really neat thing about this type of response is that the part of the brain that's responsible for it does not get lost with dementia. So you're going to see in the PowerPoint for this week a video, and it introduces you to Henry. So Henry experiences this type of response. So I'll let you check that out, and you can see how he reacts to hearing music and how his connection with music from very early on in his life still remains, even with the incidence of dementia. As far as learning objectives for this week, we're going to explore what engagement and connection really means and why they're so important for people who are living with dementia. We're also going to spend some time exploring different effective communication techniques so that we can best engage with people living with dementia. And then finally, we're going to spend some time at the end of class practicing how to facilitate a Montessori-based activity for people who are living with dementia. So just to provide a brief review of last week, with Montessori approaches for dementia care, the focus is really on the abilities that the person still has, right? We want to steer away from focusing on those deficits or the challenges that the person has and really hone in on the strengths. So this approach, of course, builds on the person's strengths and really works to foster it. The approach also takes advantage of procedural memory, which is not lost with dementia. So as a refresher, again, that's that unconscious memory that we have regarding skills and task performance. So reviewing the Montessori philosophy, it's when we support a person's environment, then the person functions at their best. They function at their highest level of ability. So in order to do this, we need to meet the various needs that a person has. So that includes like their social needs, their physical needs, emotional needs, and spiritual needs. And ultimately, the vision is that if we can meet all of these persons' fundamental needs, then we can very likely reduce the responsive behaviors that can occur out of frustration of unmet needs. So you'll remember that we used the acronym CAMEO when we look at creating Montessori-based activities. So as a refresher, we want to use cues and templates whenever necessary or appropriate. We also want to avoid unnecessary markings or clutter on the materials that we're using. So you'll remember back to last week, I used the example of a sorting activity where we used measuring spoons that can be found in the kitchen. And ideally, we'd like to use items that don't have the writing or the markings on them, because the idea is that if anything is extra or unnecessary in order to complete the activity with the person, it's not needed and we should remove it from the equation. The M in CAMEO refers to manipulatives. So these are those things that we can use to our advantage to either make an activity more difficult or easier for the person, because often we make assumptions that the activity that we're designing is the right fit for the person, but it isn't until we actually go to do the activity with them that we realize, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should have made this a little bit more challenging, or oh, maybe this is too difficult for the person. So we want to add that flexibility within the activity that we're designing so that we can tweak and tailor it if needed. So if we're going to move ahead, the E in CAMEO, so activities that are designed with a Montessori approach need to be error-free sources of success for that person. So this means that there's no right or wrong way to do this. This allows the person to make mistakes if needed, and the ability to self-correct their mistakes or errors. So this is really important for a person's autonomy and ability to make decisions that impact themselves. So we want to make an error-free activity for people. And finally, the O in our cameo is that the activity you're designing is objective and meaningful to the person, right? It's not just busy work. It's not something to distract them or keep them occupied. It has to be meaningful. So the principle here is that with any type of activity that we're designing, if you hate it, then very likely so do they. So pay attention to, your own feelings and emotions as you go about creating and interacting with people using a Montessori approach. Okay, so what is engagement? Engagement is the process of making a connection with the inner world of another person. So ultimately, we talked about having a sense of awareness and appreciation of the person's felt experience back in week 3. So this carries over for sure when we're talking about engagement and connection. We need to really have the appropriate skills in order to convey that we understand the person. So during class, we were able to discuss why we think engagement is so important. So we talked about some of the different benefits for the caregivers, and then some of the benefits for the person who's experiencing dementia. So in a nutshell, students were able to reflect that some of the benefits for the carer are to be able to do their jobs appropriately. And then some of the benefits for the person is to have socialization, to have some sort of meaningful social role. Ultimately, engagement is about connection. So the next video that I'm going to show you in the PowerPoint is a video of Brené Brown. And Brené Brown is an American research professor. She's also an author and a very dynamic public speaker. And Brené actually spent over 2 decades of her life studying human connection and what it means to be vulnerable. So I'll let you go into the video and watch that. You'll see that Brené also discusses shame and acceptance and this notion of the wholehearted person, people who feel deserving of connection. So this video is about 20 minutes long, but I really find it very impactful and very fitting that we're talking about connection this week. So why is connection important? Well, Brené talks about connection as being what gives us meaning and purpose in our own lives. She talks about connection, about feeling this sense of belonging and a sense of worthiness. And she spends some time also talking about what really holds people back from feeling this connection is a fear that they're not worthy of the connection. So feeling connected can really lessen our feelings of isolation. And for the person who's living with dementia, they can feel this sense of detachment because as the disease progresses, people and places that were once familiar start to become decreasingly familiar and less understandable. And unfortunately, when this happens, people will tend to isolate or withdraw or even retreat to a place of safety. So how can we avoid this? How can we create opportunities to build connection with people who are living with dementia? So you're going to see on the screen here, there's different degrees of engagement with people. So you'll see 3 different circles, and the A to C circles really illustrate the proportionate relationships between the person being related to and the condition of dementia. So you'll see the P represents the person themselves, and the D represents the dementia. So you'll see there's variations between circle A, B, and C, where the person or the caregiver sees more of the dementia or has more of a relationship with the dementia itself than the person. Circle B shows more of an even split. So the caregiver's connection is equally with the person as it is with the condition of dementia. And then circle C, the caregiver sees more of the person than they do with the dementia. But ultimately, all types of engagement can occur regardless of the role of the caregiver. So it could be a formal caregiver or it could be an informal caregiver, but there's a lot of different variations there across the board. So an in-class exercise that we did was to think about a relationship that we have where the person has some sort of challenge. So this could be dementia. It could be a relationship that we have with somebody who has some sort of mental health challenge or developmental challenge. And just think about the 3 different circles and what you feel best represents your engagement with that person. And as you think about this, moving forward, we're going to be talking about how to improve the quality of engagement. Just reflect on this relationship that you have. All right, so we're going to spend some time talking about principles of presenting the Montessori activity. So for your final evaluation, I'm going to be observing how you use the acronym PICNIC. So the P in PICNIC is that we first want to prepare the person for the activity. So this means that we're prepared with the materials that we're going to use for the activity in advance. Ideally, we want to provide appropriate seating arrangement. So sometimes in Montessori delivery, it's offered as a group activity. This is not the case here. We're going to be presenting an activity one-on-one with someone. But if it is a group activity, the idea is that arranging chairs in more of a closed circle or a square is optimal. We want to provide an environment that's free of distractions for the person. So we're at an advantage here where we'll be doing our presentations within the confines of a classroom. So the door will be closed and there will be no TV or radio turned off. But if we can eliminate any sort of background noise, that would be ideal. All right, so the I in our PICNIC is about extending an invitation. So we want to invite the person before we just jump into an activity. So what we want to do is, instead of saying, "Can you help me?" which can imply capability, we prefer to ask or invite the person by saying, "Would you help me?" as this implies need, and you're more likely to get an enthusiastic yes, as this is more of you kind of asking them a favor, right? The C in PICNIC is about choice. So we want to provide a choice of activities from which they can make a selection. And this really fosters the person's sense of autonomy to be able to make a choice. And we need to also accept the fact that the choice may be that the person chooses not to participate. So some different examples I have here on the screen are, would you like to do this puzzle about animals or about plants? Or would you like to help me sort these coins? Or would you like to continue reading your book? So you're still offering a choice by offering not to participate, but it's all in how you present it, right? And so the N in PICNIC, so there's no such thing as a right way. With Montessori-based activities, we want to allow the person to work through their activity without correcting them or stepping in. We really want to avoid redirecting the person and allow them that opportunity to self-correct and make mistakes. Because if we constantly jump in and make adjustments and correct the person, they may likely develop a fear of trying the activity again, or even trying a more challenging activity down the road. So the I represents how we want to illustrate by physical demonstration. So before expecting the person to just jump into the activity, we want to show them how to complete the task. So this can also be used as a really good opportunity for us to assess the person's interest, right? So it can be more of that diagnostic piece. So if you're introducing an activity and showing them by physical demonstration, it's pretty easy to see whether they're watching us closely or not. And that may indicate that the person is genuinely interested in the activity. So finally, the C in picnic refers to closure. So we don't want to just complete the activity with the person and then it's done. We want to provide closure. We want to close that loop to the activity by asking them first whether they enjoyed the activity or not, and would they like to do this activity again sometime. So the third video that I have for you this week actually goes through Montessori activity demonstration. So you will see a caregiver facilitating activity with an individual. And the beginning of the video talks about some of the important principles of Montessori programming, which we're already familiar with, but it'll be a really good review for you. And then it moves into her actually facilitating the activity. So as you go through watching this video, pay attention to the picnic and those principles that she utilizes as she facilitates with the person. So once we complete the activity with the person, how do we know if the activity was effective or not? So while I was developing this lesson plan, I came across a really neat app for a phone or tablet that comes out of the Center for Applied Research in Dementia in Ohio. So it is an American app, but what it does is it allows caregivers to self-evaluate the activity that they conducted and to determine whether it was effective for the person. So you'll see on the screen here, there's all the different principles. So whether or not the person was invited to participate in the activity, whether a choice was offered, whether seating arrangement was appropriate for the person, and so on and so on. And the app also allows you to create customized folders for different people or clients or residents if it's in a long-term care setting, and compile a bit of a running list as to different activities that may have worked for the person or activities that may not have worked. So I thought this was really neat, pretty cutting edge and innovative approach to Montessori tracking. So how else do we know if the activity was effective? Pretty simple, just ask the person, right? And that comes down to the closure piece at the end of picnic. If the person enjoyed the activity, you will know and they will tell you. So don't be afraid to ask them. So what we did at the end of class was we spent a little bit of time practicing the principles of facilitating Montessori. So I shared with the class some different activities that I had put together. Some of them were sorting activities, some of them were scooping and transferring activities, and you will see the photos located in Moodle under this week, so you can get a sense of what that looks like. And we spent the rest of class going through how we would facilitate these different types of activities. So you'll remember from a couple weeks ago, I introduced you to part A of the assignment. So this is literally how I'm going to be grading your final reports. So the first part is you're going to come up with a profile of the person who's living with dementia, and this is worth 5 marks. So I'm asking that, you create this person and identify what the person's name is, maybe how old they are, any sorts of types of dementia that they're experiencing. So if you go back to the lesson on the 7 A's of dementia, maybe there's something specific that they're grappling with. I'm also asking that you identify any of the person's challenges or strengths and abilities, whether or not they have specific responsive behaviors. So maybe your person wanders, or maybe they experience sundowning. And then finally, what are their hobbies and what are their needs? So are they interested in gardening, or are they animal enthusiasts? So really spend some time with that, but the profile is worth 5 marks of your 25%. So part B of your activity is you're going to be creating a meaningful activity using the cameo principles. So that's the cueing, avoiding unnecessary markings and clutter. Manipulatives need to be a part of your activity. So these are things that I'll be able to see myself, right? If it can be made more difficult or easier or modified for variety in some way. I need to observe whether this activity is error-free. So, is there a chance that the person can succeed? And I need to observe whether the objective is connected back to what you say the person's interests and needs are. And then part C of your report is actually the presentation itself of the activity. And this is worth 10 points. So in class, or if you choose to do a virtual demonstration for our virtual learners, I need to be able to observe the picnic principles. So I need to see if you prepared for the activity. Did you offer appropriate seating? So ideally you want to be sitting across from the person, facing them, not behind them or not to their side. We need to see if you are providing or extending an invitation to that person before you just jump into the activity. We need to see whether you provided choice. So even if the choice is that the person not participate, that's okay, as long as you're extending that option. We need to see that there's no such thing as a right way. So again, there's error-free, right? And did you illustrate how to complete the activity? So did you demonstrate it to them? Did you show them, this is how we're going to sort these coins today? And then finally, did you provide closure to the activity? So did you ask them if it was an enjoyable activity and would they like to perform this activity again sometime? So A, B, and C parts of the report will come together to form this 25%. And again, if you're going to be choosing an in-class presentation, you're going to have to pair up with somebody so that that person can role play the person living with dementia and then allow you to demonstrate the activity with them. So I'm asking that you bring any materials that you might need in order to demonstrate your activity to class. And please see me if you need any help with this. I can help you brainstorm and come up with ideas if needed. And then I'll remind you of this before you begin presenting, but I'm going to ask that you read your profile of the person with dementia to the class before you begin your demonstration, just so we have a little bit of context as to what the presentation or what the activity is designed to address. And if you're choosing to participate virtually, I'm asking that you video record your demonstration and send it to me before class on April 2nd. So again, before you demonstrate the activity, please make sure that you read your profile of the person with dementia. And I'll be sharing these with the class for people who are attending in person during the presentation week. And finally, I'm encouraging everybody to feel free to prepare reminder cards to help you as you are presenting your activity. For the in-class participants, I'm going to have this up on the board, so this will be there available to prompt you if needed. But absolutely anything that you need to help you succeed and be able to present a very meaningful presentation, that would be fantastic, and I wholeheartedly encourage that. So that's all I have for you this week, everyone. And as always, if you have any questions or you require clarity or more direction, feel free to send me an email. That's the best way to get a hold of me, and we can go from there. I hope you have a fantastic week, everyone.